In today's episode of The Advisory Deck, we're going to talk all about advisory boards, what they are, what they're not, who they're designed for and when they should be considering them, the risks of not having one, and how to start them in the most non-threatening, simple possible way. Great episode for SME owners and leaders and CEOs who've been lying in bed at night looking at the ceiling, not quite knowing what to do next. Hope you enjoy. Hi, welcome back to The Advisory Deck. I'm Troy Forrest and this is James McGill. Afternoon, James.
Hey, Troy.
For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of our company before, we're a couple of blokes who have some experience in different facets of business, riffing about business concepts, challenges that we think are pertinent to business owners and leaders navigating their organisations through and beyond 2020. My background is in sales, business development, and I've spent the last decade facilitating strategic planning processes for a wide range of organisations. James, your background?
Operations, sort of merger and acquisition work, business growth, development activities.
Perfect. So between us, we've seen a little bit, covered a lot of sort of spaces. And what we thought we'd do is we've called this the Advisory Deck. Beautiful backdrop behind us on the deck, but we've actually created a deck as well. And we've got a number of business cases, case studies, concepts, challenges, company types. So we thought we'd spend 10 to 15 minutes talking about, and then maybe throwing over to an expert who can go a little deeper in a few minutes for you as well. So normally we pick at random from the deck, but I'm just going to lay a few out here. I'm going to get James to sort of pick one here. You can't sort of see them, but we've got all kinds of concepts and challenges here. So James, why don't you pick one that's floating your boat or is worth talking about?
I'm going to avoid the one that says selling in 2020. That's just too challenging to think on my feet in a COVID environment. That's my next one. We'll do that next time. Let's go with advisory boards. I think the time is right to talk about that.
Advisory boards. What's an advisory board, James?
An advisory board is not a governance board. How's that for an answer? Let's break them out. I think it's pretty important to talk through the difference. So a governance board is a board that often is associated with a public company, a listed company, certainly a larger company. And a governance board has some very, very clear obligations in terms of the Corporations Act and is often focused on risk, on compliance, on financials, looking after shareholder interests, and quite often because of the risk that an actual board member faces, governance board members are paid for their time. It is a relatively high risk position. An advisory board is more about sales, growth, helping maybe a small to medium business where the shareholders or the executive don't have all the skills and expertise within the business. They don't need a full-time person, but they want some wise heads sitting around the table from time to time to help them grow that business. And that advisory board, if you're an advisory board member, you don't have, if it's structured properly, it's always key, you don't have the same legal obligations that you do under the Corporations Act. So an advisory board member doesn't face the risk of being sued if there's an issue with the company. And because of that, the fee that the advisory board member gets is often much smaller, or it might be a bottle of wine, or you might do it as a favour to someone. So they're quite different at a legal level. And as a result, an advisory board is a much more fun and interesting and dynamic place to sit because you're all about growing the business. You have to still do it responsibly. It's someone else's money that you're helping to spend. Yeah. But you don't spend the hours that a governance board person does on risk, on compliance, on thinking about all the things that are going to keep you out of jail as a board member and make sure the shareholders are happy. So there's a very big difference between them. That's at a high level. What do they do beyond that? Depends on the situation.
Whatever you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a topic and a concept that I see a lot of SMEs toy with. You know, I'm not big enough for a governance board per se, or we might even have one, and we might actually want some specialist skills, and every so often I just want someone in my corner who's been there, done that, has a dimension of expertise or experience in an area that can give me some sort of trusting counsel as well. It's one that I see a lot of SMEs actually quite hesitant though to take the leap with, or they say, oh, but I've got my cousin Bob, he's you know, or two of my mates, we sit around and have a glass of wine every so often, and I bounce ideas off them, and that's but taking that leap into formalising or structuring a good advisory board is something I think probably vexes a lot of SME owners. So what do you reckon that is?
Well, I think people who are in executive, whether you're an executive of one, as a CEO and major shareholder of your own business, often you feel like, you know, talking to so many of people in this situation over the last, you know, X number of years, you feel like someone from outside either doesn't get the situation, the environment that you're in. So if someone else from the outside doesn't know your industry, doesn't know the competitors, how could they possibly add value? So that's one situation. The other is, I don't know if I can afford someone, because I think they think it's going to cost them $5,000 or $10,000 a month to have an advisory board member or an advisory board, and they can't afford the $120,000 in fees every year. So I think there's some misconceptions about what an advisory board does and the value they can add, and because of that, and maybe some bad experiences with cousin Bob, people go, well, I'll just keep on doing my own thing because I'll eventually get there. It's worked up until now and I don't know what the solution is, so therefore I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. Yes. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. I guess the makeup and the structure and the skills or type of people that you might elect to bring in on that kind of a conversation also vexes people. If you say, well, okay, I know probably cousin Bob's not quite going to cut it. I do need a couple of those, but what's the makeup? What's the mix? I'm dealing with Challenge X right now, so I need an HR specialist or I need a finance specialist. But in my experience and my observation is that if you can get a combo of depth and breadth of skills, because the continuum of challenges and opportunities that your business is going to face will keep changing, right?
Absolutely.
So therefore, should the makeup of that group continue to change over time too, as you deal with different issues?
Well, let me throw that one back to you. You ran a company, Parcel Nest, for a few years, and I think you had an advisory board.
I did.
And if you went back in time and looked at the skill sets that you needed, what would you have changed about the advisory board on day one? Yeah. And would you have evolved the members of that board over time as the business evolved and as the market evolved?
Yeah, it's a great question and challenging for me to think about as well. So I did set one up, and I set it up with a combination of people. We ended up having 5 people on there, who were, for a very small startup business, sounds like a lot, I know, but they were selected for specific reasons, you know, experience in the wine industry. Wine was a product that our product had a good fit for. Just general senior life and leadership experience in a number of markets. Had a lawyer on there who was terrific, and they were all terrific, by the way. Shout out to the former Parcel Nest advisory board members. And so what I learned from that process was that your needs do change, and you're going to lean or place emphasis on the advice of select members of your crew, you know, depending on the situation. I think now, a number of years on, look, I am a lot more agile in my thinking around, you know, well, they probably serve their purpose for that facet or that moment in time or that stage of the business life cycle. I now need someone else to come in as well. But a couple of them I'd have, they're probably the evergreen members, if I could call them that, versus the seasonal members. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Did you run or have a charter, an advisory board charter that set out the rules of engagement with those members?
We did. And again, having a lawyer and having, I suppose, a couple of members on the advisory board who've been on other advisory boards was pretty handy. We had an accountant on there as well, which was kind of nice. Which was about clarifying expectations, which was about sort of saying, okay, you're not just here out of the goodness of your own heart. You know I'm a startup. and I don't have bucket loads of cash to pour into you right now. However, here's the quid pro quo. You know, here's how this will work, and yeah, you know, take them out for dinner and bottles of wine and those kind of ideas. But the ambition being opportunity for skin in the game at a future date when kind of success came. But it was about that clarity of, you know, instruction in how this would actually work. One of the advisory board members took on the role as the chair, and it allowed me as the business owner to give myself over to a process where I felt I had to be in control of everything all the time on the actual, you know, how the business was going to come together. It was also very challenging, I've got to tell you, and having some very tough love questions asked of you, you know, it feels like you're in the spotlight. At the time, it's you know, it's quite confronting, but it's so unbelievably healthy, right? You know, because if, particularly for a startup, if you're going to confront these issues, confront them early. And if I had one sort of thing that I've learned from that process, it's you've got to have people who are relatively fearless in asking you those things. If you're going to have someone who's just going to piss in your pocket and tell you your business plan's wonderful, it's a waste of time, right?
No value.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's probably one of the key things I took from it.
And I think when we talk about advisory boards, it's like anything in business. There isn't a clear 100% foolproof plan.
No.
Right? So you can have your best efforts, best endeavours, and over time, I think what you have to be open to is continuing to change, whether it's the composition of the advisory board, what their purpose is, figuring out that this isn't working. One of the things we find with advisory boards that often fails for the company and the advisory board is the mindset, and you referenced it just before, it's the mindset that the advisory board sits, where's the camera? The advisory board sits here and the CEO sits below them like a normal corporate governance board, where the CEO reports into the board. My view on advisory boards is it should be the CEO sits up here, and the advisory board is there to serve the CEO. That includes asking some tough questions, but they're a resource for the company, as a corporate governance board is too, but normally a corporate governance board drives activity and drives strategy. I think that's often the mistake that's made from especially a startup or a company that's not used to a board, is thinking, I've got to go to an advisory board meeting and do all this reporting and explain myself and so forth. That to me isn't what it's about. Yes, they should be asking you some tough questions, but you should be going to the advisory board session saying, you know, you're here, person A, as a sales expert. How are you going to help us improve our sales? What can you do to help us get our product to market more quickly? What can you do to make our contracts for customers better if you're the lawyer? What can you do to improve our financial reporting? I think that change in mindset so that you as the CEO are in control still is really, really critical. You want the tough questions, but that's a personality type. And I think the personality type shouldn't be turning up and going, I'm going to ask the CEO to do more work. The last thing you want as a CEO of a company, any company, is doing more reporting, more administration, because that normally adds very, very little to the success of the business. So I think to me that charter which says, here's the relationship, and then you find the right people who are going to help you do the work, which means if I'm a governance board member, I turn up having read my board reports, and I've got my standard questions, and I'm always thinking about risk and compliance and so forth, but I've got my own lens, but I'm thinking, I'll walk in after having read my board papers, ask some questions, and walk away again. Normal sort of corporate governance board. If I'm an advisory board member, I should be turning up saying, here's what I've done to help you since the last meeting. I've made some phone calls to people in the industry to help. I've set up some meetings. I've opened doors. I've minimised risk. I think it's still important to do that, but I'm helping this business to grow. It's more like a consulting relationship. A
real proactivity, yes, there'll be those questions that the business owner or the CEO or COO might want answered, and hey guys, can I get your advice on this particular matter? But that knowledge that someone's out there, I've been thinking about you, I've been thinking about this challenge, I took the liberty of test driving this, I've had some ideas, and I think this is a way I can help you moving forward as well. What a breath of fresh air, right? I guess then my question and my thinking goes to, well, okay, what's the moment that an SME owner or a leader of a business goes, I've been toying with the idea and I'm sick of just taking my own counsel, or I've got a really restricted range of people that I can access quality advice from. What's that moment in time? What's that trigger? And what's then the right sort of starting point to move forward? What's your thoughts on that?
I'll give you two answers.
Okay.
The first one's relevant, the second one's out there. The first one, when you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and those issues are churning around your head and you don't know what to do next and you don't have the team, which most small companies don't. You don't have a really solid team because you can't afford a really solid team. You've got an operational team, right? You haven't got the strategic team.
Yep.
You don't know what to do next. I think that to me is the time to start to build an advisory board. And that advisory board might be a person of one to start with. Like, you don't need to have 3 or 5 people to start an advisory board. You can start with a one-page charter which just spells out how it's going to work, and you find a person, and that might be a salesperson or another operational kind of person, and your focus with them is saying, can we sit down once a month and talk through something? I need this help. And over time you might go, okay, now I'm going to add in someone who's got some different skills. And I think it's being honest with someone and saying, I need some help. It's probably for 6 months to get through this time, and then it may not go beyond that. And I think that when we talk about remuneration, that becomes tricky then, but that's part of that discussion. The second answer, which is less relevant, but it's something that burns in my head, and it's about retirement living. I've spent some time consulting in the retirement industry, and something that sticks in my head from that time is just about every person who moves to a retirement village says, I wish we'd done this years ago. Right? Okay. It's that regret that the lifestyle that they're now enjoying was something that they waited too long because they thought, for whatever reason, they had these misconceptions about living in a village, and they realise when they get there it's a weight off their shoulders and they get to enjoy themselves more because they've got this community around them that's sharing some common values, and it's taking away the things you don't enjoy doing and let you doing the things that you do. And I think advisory boards are the same. Humans are pack animals. Yes. And I think if you're trying to do stuff by yourself and you can't afford a $150,000 executive to sit there with you, then maybe you can afford $20,000 for 3 really good people to give you a few hours a month, and that might make you just feel a lot better and accelerate your growth, reduce your risk well beyond what you thought possible if you find the right people.
It's an absolute measure of leadership maturity and intelligence to put your hand up and say, my own thinking is just too restricted now, I need that kind of help, and start the process of finding someone. We might throw over to someone who's got some thoughts and deeper insights into advisory boards.
Hi, Tim Siebert from Bentleys Chartered Accountants here. I'd like to share with you a couple of thoughts on advisory boards. Working in the business and not on the business is a common concern for many businesses. Businesses are naturally run by experts in that business, and unfortunately, not many of us can be experts at everything. History tells us the most successful leaders surrounded themselves with the right people to support them, and this is the concept of advisory boards. An advisory board is about surrounding your business with experts that complement your expertise and support you. The board should not consist of only people who are experts in your line of business and should rarely be family. Arguably, such people may naturally trend towards what worked for them or even what worked in their time. The board should be a blend of complementary skills that supports you and provides constructive criticism in areas that you do not necessarily specialise in. It should allow you to work on the business and make informed business decisions. Whether accountants, strategists or finance and capital specialists, the advisors need to understand your business, even be passionate about it, but arguably they should not come from the same discipline. You know how to drive trucks, you know how to run a cattle station, build boats or run a medical practice. You know how to run whatever business is relevant to you. You should be seeking different skills that complement your skills and not duplicate them. There is no one size fits all, and over time it may evolve, change, and even at times the board may become less pivotal to some decisions. Often it depends on the life cycle of the business. Whilst they have no binding or executive function, advisory boards are important sounding boards that challenge and ensure decisions and actions are fully warranted and the impacts are completely understood. It's important to understand the function and the role that you want the board to play. There must be commitment and trust from all parties, particularly from the business owner. To make them work, regular meetings, strong chairpersons, planned agendas, and even a charter or terms of reference are important. The advisory board is is there to help you work on your business, to focus on your goals and to understand the impact of your decisions. Thank you.
Terrific insights. Thank you very much for sharing that. So I guess, James, final take-home points on this topic of advisory boards. I'm an SME owner, or I'm a CEO who's not got the benefit of a lot of counsel around me, and I'm thinking I probably need something. What's your takeouts?
Don't be frightened by the concept of an advisory board. They're not things that consume time and money. They should add value. They should take a few hours a month to really help you move forward. It's not about reporting and spending lots of time doing analysis. That's not what they should be doing. And if you have those 3 o'clock musings, wake up in the morning, stare at the ceiling, and you can't figure out the answers to your bigger business problems, that's what the advisory board should help you solve.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be scared, and don't be restricted in your thinking about what it is and what it isn't. It's not a governance board. It is people that you can bring in to help you navigate challenges, bring fresh perspectives, bounce things off. I benefited immensely from the council and that sense of a team bigger than me. It's just that helps me sleep better at night. So we hope that's been interesting and useful and some good food for thought. We actually have an advisory deck here, so if you ever want to come and sit on it with us and talk about your experiences, deal with your business challenges, we'll make you a coffee. We'd love to have that kind of an unpacking discussion, and we can help in advisory capacities as well. So details down the bottom of the screen of how to get in touch. James, thank you so much.
Thanks, Troy.
Pleasure as always. Cheers.